Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie Podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian. And joining me, as always, is your co-host, Jim.
I am so excited to talk about Toe Jam and Earl. This is going to be the best.
Which I'm sure those will come up. And your co-host, Spaz.
Brought to you by Plenty of Caffeine.
It's 5:30 in the afternoon. That's tired. That's tired. Yeah. Folks, we have two guests tonight, and not to knock any of our previous guests or future guests. I love all our guests, but one of our guests, especially tonight, is very special. Joining us, you guys are in California. Yay. Greg Johnson, founder and head of Human Nature Studios. Human Nature? Did I say that? Or Human Nature?
You did.
Okay. Because I tried to go with I tried to go with the capitalization. And Anthony Vaughn, the project lead of Starflight 3, which is the main game we're here to talk about. Welcome, gentlemen.
Howdy do. Greetings.
I am all aflutter. Seriously, I'm really having a problem focusing right now because if y'all don't know, Starflight is one of my top 3 games ever. It was the first DOS game I ever owned. Bought it from a Radio Shack with the Tandy 1000EX back in 1986.
Basically, Brian has a waifu pillow with the Starflight ship.
Yeah.
You know the silhouette of the Veloxy in the character selection screen. I have a pillow. No, no, I don't. No, I really don't. But
too late. It's out. It's out.
Someone's gonna make it. No.
Well, here's the thing, right? Is like his online name has been Veloxy.
Yeah.
For real?
As long as
I've been using Veloxy since I registered with Jumpgate back in 1999.
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
no kidding. Wow.
That has been my handle in just about every space game. And if I can't get Veloxy, I'll either get Ulik or Gazertoid. One of the
right. And we had the Jumpgate guy, like 3 weeks ago? So this is like full circle.
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
But guys, I don't want to take away, this is great, and I'm so glad you love Starflight, but I don't want to take away from Greg's time. I mean, it's not just about me. Just kidding. Obviously, it's Greg's. That's a joke for those who don't know. Greg's the guy who created all this.
Yeah, we were getting there. That was a long way to get there. But
So who are you anyway? And who let you in?
I'm Greg's bodyguard and car driver. Yeah, I reach things in high places for Greg, carry heavy objects for Greg. No, so I'm Anthony Vaughn. I'm the project lead for Starflight 3 that we're currently crowdfunding at Fig right now.
Right, and that campaign is currently ongoing. It is about 50% funded as we
we're about
sit here.
Funded. Yeah, yep. It's crawling slowly towards the finish line, so we got about just under 10 days left, and we're getting there. It's going to be I'll let Greg discuss how Starflight 3 fits into the universe and everything like that. But yeah, it's exciting times, man.
Well, I mean, we know Greg's history, right? But yours, I don't. So what were you doing before this? Like Uber driver? Or?
Yeah, just like no, Greg's personal driver. No, So
don't put yourself down, Anthony. You're quite good at it.
Yeah,
I mean, despite the accidents. I mean, but otherwise,
I don't have a license, so they're never going to find me. So it doesn't matter. I've been making games for just over 15 years. I've mostly worked at places like Backbone Entertainment and Foundation 9 and Double Fine and Sega. And so I've had a pretty good, Sega. So I had some pretty good runs there with, I've shipped about, 30 plus games, mostly as an engineer, also as a biz dev guy. So I met Greg in the early 2000s, where I was an engineer for a game that Greg was kind of brought in to, focus the design work for. And that's where I first met him. And that was almost in 2000. That was 2005, I think. So ever since then, I just, coincidentally ran into the guy who made literally my #1 game of all time, Starflight 2. And cool. So it was pretty rad. And then that's kind of how it started as an engineer. And then I got a chance to actually work with Greg on Doki Doki Universe, one of Human Nature's PlayStation, Vita, and PC games. I was an engineer there. At Sega, I was a biz dev guy that worked across the table from Greg to help him take care of some Toe Jam and Earl licensing agreements.
Yeah, that was so funny. Anthony worked for me here on Doki Doki Universe as part of the team. And then right after that, he was at Sega, and I was negotiating with Sega about the rights for the original games, and it was Anthony sitting across the table from me negotiating with me.
As you can imagine, it was a pretty easy negotiation. Like, well, we'll fix this, Greg. He's like, sounds good. All right, talk to you later. It's one of those deals. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that is an awesome story. But I would like to go back to the beginning, if you don't mind, to the beginning of this whole thing. So when did you guys start working on the original, and how long did it take before it came out? I know some of this, but I don't know if everyone does. So let's start at the beginning.
The original as in Starflight 1?
Yeah. Let's go all the way. Okay. Let's go all the way back.
Right, wind it back.
All right. That's well before I was in the industry.
Okay. So, what is that? That's like
86 is when it came out, the first one.
Yeah, right. So 1982 was really kind of when it started, and I was still in college.
Dear Lord.
And at UC San Diego, and my roommate Alec Kercho, who was one of the programmers on Starflight on the original game. He actually jumped into the project before me. His dad had some connection with the producer Joe Ibarra, and Alec was hired as an engineer. And I was always looking over his shoulder, asking, "What are you doing? What is that? That's so cool. Can I do it? Can I get involved?" And he was like, "No, the game's almost done. We don't need anybody." That was, of course, after I started, we were 3 years in development to make the game. So Alec was a little bit off there. But I was brought on. It was straight out of school. I had never made a game before, but that actually wasn't that much of a liability in those days because nobody had ever made a game before. It was really the early days, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was totally, everybody was like, do you know what you're doing? No. Do you? No. Well, we'll figure it out as we go along. And so I was straight out of school, and there was another designer on the game, a really interesting fellow named Jim. I don't remember his last name, but he ran a board game shop, and he was a funny guy, man. He had in his apartment, he had rows of bookshelves like filled with fantasy and science fiction books. When you walked into his apartment, you thought you were like in a library. There were like aisles, and he would go out of his apartment once a month or so to buy a basket full of these like giant kielbasa sausages, which he lived on, and then he would hole up in his apartment again. And he was just a very interesting kind of eccentric fellow. And he had this idea for the game. What they hired me to do was create all of these little random, unrelated scenarios for encounters. And I was like, okay, so what's the story? Like, what's in the universe? What happens? What's the big story arc, and who are the characters and the relationships and the alien races? And they're like, oh, there is none of that. You just go out there and you just, you fight. And we want you to make these kind of, it'll be like dice rolling, kind of like a board game, right? Like that was the original concept for Starflight. And so I still have those original scenario sheets that I made up in these old notebooks and such. I have all those notes from the original days. But I after a little while, I got kind of bored, and I started getting up on the table at our meetings and waving my arms around and saying, "Oh, we need a story, and how about this? And the alien races have to have a personality and a history, and how about this, and how about that?" And the rest of the team really got into it and said, "Yeah, that's what we want too." And eventually, Jim sort of just kind of made an exit off of the project, I guess. And I found myself straight out of school being the lead designer on this project. Wow. So that's how it started.
Sounds like he was living the dream, man. Like he basically lived in a library and he ate sausage all the time and like never was bugged. That's awesome. That's like my dream.
That's pretty great.
I did always feel bad though. I still do, even thinking back a little bit, because Jim was a good guy, you know, and it was just his vision for the project wasn't really what the rest of the team wanted. So I ended up kind of inadvertently, you know, stealing that away. But, you know, it was a long and difficult process, as games always are, even today. But back then, you know, we were almost canceled at least 5 or 6 times.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and none of us really knew what we were doing, like I said. And the lead engineer, Dave Bolton, he another one of our engineers, I won't go into too much detail, but he was out for the count for a while because they were just working so hard. And at one point, one of the engineers just stopped sleeping for a week because his mind got so blown by the whole idea of fractally creating a universe, or algorithmically creating a universe with this fractal geometry, and having an entire universe in one seed number, like the entire universe that could like unfold because of the algorithms into this consistent, you know, universe with hundreds and hundreds of planets and star systems and entire ecosystems, and down to the individual creatures on a mountain, all out of this one single seed number because of the algorithm. And he was so captivated by the math behind this and by the whole idea of it that he literally stopped sleeping, and that caused some pretty major problems for a while. So we had a lot of crazy drama in that development.
See, I would fear a revelation. Like, you know, you get the formula, right? And it's like, oh my God, it works. And then the clouds part and God says, you got me. Okay. That's how we did it.
If I could share a story with you, you mentioned a guy didn't sleep for a week. I actually did the same thing playing the game once. I drank like a whole 6-pack of Jolt. Remember Jolt? And didn't sleep for maybe 6 days and just played. It was my second playthrough of this, of the first game.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like you're exaggerating, right?
No, this was like the summer of I think my 7th or 8th grade year at school. I had like nothing but time. And so that is what I did for almost an entire week, is just play this.
And you kept his pee in jars, like under the desk.
Just
I had one of those bags, you know, one of those, I forget what they call them now, one of those bags.
Like bleacher buddies?
Yes,
you know?
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Those have got me through some Starflight and some EVE Online myself, so I can relate.
I'm going to think about something else now.
Greg, just focus on it, though. Just picture it.
Well, I have to say, back in the day when this came out, it really set itself. I'm sure you've probably heard this a million times, but it was amazing how it set itself apart in a few key ways. One, it wasn't a simple game. Like, games back then were so simple. Like, even the more complicated things were still so simple. And then you have this. But it was also funny. Like, so many, like, especially spacey games took themselves so seriously, like Defender, so serious and stuff like that. And there was a lot of humor in this game. That's one of the reasons I love the Velox, is that they took no crap, and they were just, they knew they were the cock of the walk. And they made sure you knew it too.
Yeah, that's right. They actually were always one of my favorite races. Us are best good buddies every time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, yeah, they talked and stuff. Yeah, that was mostly just out of boredom, really. Like, I don't understand how people can work on game for years and not go a little, get a little kooky and start having fun with it. And that was. I couldn't do it. That was mostly kind of to entertain myself as I was doing the writing. I kind of had to do that. But I'm sure, like you noticed too, I really enjoyed the whole sort of parody aspect of it, of having the different alien races be kind of caricatures of different types of people, right? The ultra obsequious kowtowing spearmen who are all full of bluster and then would just turn right around and be, begging for mercy, oh great, wonderful, demigod of my, prayers, that sort of thing. But I had a lot of fun. Or the Gazertoid, right? Remember them?
I love the Gazertoid.
Sort of mega religious proselytizing aliens.
They were so mean. They were so mean. They were so angry all the time.
I love. My favorite is still the Humna Humna because they're so vain and so they had no self-awareness whatsoever, and they just knew they were awesome, but they kind of weren't. Like, it was great.
Yeah, right. Like overly verbose. They were the easiest ones for me to write because that's how I write normally.
Nice.
One of my favorite things about the first game is when you completed it, it didn't end. Like the second one ended. That was like really abrupt. But the first one, it didn't end. So you had this badass ship. So I always just went and harassed the Gazertoid. Because I loved making them mad. I would jump around. I would shoot at them. And then I would hail them and be real nice. And then I would jump around. I would shoot at them.
They earned it, though.
They really did.
They have to make your life miserable for that turnaround at the end to feel good, right? So that when you finally get to a point where you can hammer them, it just feels so good. Finally. But you have to have really suffered first.
It was so great because they were like, there was nothing you could really say to them that would make them happy, like ever, really. So, but yeah, the races were wonderful. It like really more than any other game, especially at the time, made me feel like I was a starship captain. It was just astounding. And
that's so cool. It's funny. We didn't know that it was all going to work until very late on. We had so many. There was as you pointed out, there was so much complexity to it, and there was so many engineering challenges to squeeze all of that down onto the floppy disks. And
oh my God.
We had, our engineers, Tim Lee and Bob Gonsalves and Alec Kercho, they were so good, all of them. And Tim Lee, he came in at one point and he saw kind of what a mess we had and started restructuring and writing all of these technical docs. But the funny thing is, we just didn't know that the game was going to all come together and work in all of its pieces and that it was even solvable until pretty late on. I remember being very shocked and then pretending like I wasn't when somebody finished the game for the first time and actually got to the end and that they realized it was possible. Yeah,
because Greg, you described this to me once as, and I could be messing up the actual description, but how you had to design basically like hundreds of quote unquote gates for the player to get through. And that's still pretty different from today's design. Like, for example, like Mass Effect, like wonderful series, one of the inspirations that came from Starflight. But that's still yes, you can explore as you wish to a degree and stuff, but like you're still pretty much, when it comes to the main narrative, you're on a sort of straight and narrow path with that. You're on rails for that. But with Starflight, I remember you said one of the major things that you guys focused on really hard was to make that design like a graph, like a big networked graph of entering into the story from 1,000,000,001 different points and letting it. I mean, can you describe some of that? Because I think that was a really cool conversation you had over where Paul Ritchie talked to you about like designing that and how to do that. That stuff was so cool.
Yeah, you want me to talk about that a little bit, you guys?
Absolutely. Oh, I want to hear everything. I want all the sausage. I don't want to hear all the sausage.
I figured they wanted stories. Yeah.
Just hit me with as much as you can. Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, so like Anthony just mentioned, that was like big and eternal thanks to my good friend Paul Ritchie, who was he preceded me at Electronic Arts. He was one of the very originals there. You know, he had done a game and released it prior to my arrival there called Archon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that one.
I loved Archon.
It
was like chess plus kind of.
John and Ann Freeman. Yeah, the chessboard pieces that kind of come alive. Yeah. So Paul was kind of one of the few sort of old hands already there. And, you know, when we started, of course, I didn't know what I was doing, and I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And Paul sort of took me under his wing, and whenever I had problems, he'd kind of point me in a direction and give me these great ideas. One of the things he said to me when I was trying to figure out how to structure an interactive story was, he said, "Okay, let's get a big sheet of paper, like cover almost, you know, the whole floor, and then we're going to start writing down the network of the story flow." And he described to me what I should do, and that was enough to get me started. And I created this big network of working backwards. So starting from the end, starting with the crystal planet, and you know, discovering what it was and how to and what you needed to destroy it. Here's where you needed to go to learn the information of its locale. Here's where you here's what you had to do in order to get that information. You needed to be you know, befriend this race, and you needed to get this information that was in these 3 locations, and then in each of those locations, how did you get that information? I basically worked back this big network that had all of these different potential pathways, and then sometimes it would converge down into narrow places where I knew where the players would essentially have to go, so I could kind of control the flow more tightly at those places. And I ended up with this thing that was all over the floor of what each race basically knew, what you had to do to get past every point, and all these alternate paths that you could take at any point throughout the game. And that works when you are uncovering a backstory. So that's essentially what the story in Starflight is. It's a very detailed story, and but it's a backstory as opposed to a type of story that's more dynamic, where the choices that a player makes actually change the course of what's happening in the story. That's a much harder problem to solve. You can't really do that with just a network structure like that. But with that network structure, it really works well for uncovering backstory, because the backstory is fixed. It never changes, but you can traverse that network in any path, in any order, and you find story pieces in different orders. And then where I said those gates narrow, that's where you control. You say, okay, they're going to know all of these 15 pieces first in the sort of, but then they have to, you know, then you can say, well, I need them to know all of this before they can pass through this gate into the next section of the story. So you have this very loose control over how you can deliver that story, but you do it in a way that gives the players a lot of freedom to move through it. And of course, the player's never aware of those pathways. It just feels like you can go anywhere at any time.
And the reason I wanted Greg to describe that is because that for me, I think, is the magic moment that was for Starflight, the Starflight games, was it felt like I found this out. It didn't feel like I was told it.
Right.
You know,
right.
It's still great.
Well, that's a thing that I think we don't see a lot in games today, right? Because a lot of people follow that roguelike formula, and it's just like, everything's procedurally
because it's
generated,
easier.
right?
It's easier to do that. It's easier to put them
It
on,
is,
on a path.
but it's like,
you know?
if for the people who have occasionally heard me mention a certain other game that is entirely procedural, I won't mention Elite, but that's what they need. Is they need some thread of a narrative in there that the player can find, and once they find it, then they can like hunt for the next piece of it, right? And kind of string it along, and then it develops into something. And
totally.
and you let the procedural stuff fill the gaps in between, but then you have to have those keynotes that you hit that's like, okay, now you're funneled down a path a little bit, and then we let you go again.
Yeah, quite honestly, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of that. I always thought that there would be a lot more growth in kind of conceptually in the areas of interactive story and design, and that people would take that basic structure for delivering backstory and evolve it into something that could also include a better, more well understood structures for also having a dynamic story on top of the backstory, because that's where the real challenges are in my view. What I was describing is not easy to do, but it's not, once you understand it, it's not that difficult really. But creating a story where you change the state of the world based on what you're doing, you destroy a planet, or you rescue an alien race that wasn't going to be there before, and now they are all of a sudden, and so the whole story can change. Or you have specific characters who you develop relationships with for better or worse, and now they do things that never would have happened before early on in the story, and that changes the whole course of what comes after. That's where the real like gold is, or the brass ring for designers, of interactive story. That's what's and creating that in a simulated, very open-ended type of environment that doesn't, even if you do it in a branching way, people tend not to do that much either. I guess I'm just saying I've been surprised that what we've seen more in the realm of interactive story since then has been like what you guys pointed out. It tends to be moving from point A to point B, uncovering a linear story, and then the designers perceive their job to be to put obstacles in your way, whether that's combat or puzzles or something hidden, but there's something you have to do to unlock the next step, and then you just move along down the path where you get sort of fed the story. And that's kind of the common wisdom of game design, so much so it's become so common that what I've seen in a lot of young designers is they don't even question it. Like I'll go talk at game design graduate students or whatever, and we'll have discussions, and the general attitude is, well, that's what games are. That's what interactive story means.
Well, I wonder if some of that doesn't come, the gated story stuff doesn't come from like the Japanese influence, especially in JRPGs, right? Because it's like, well, I can't go in that castle yet because I have to be level whatever. So now I'm going to take advantage of the procedural world and run around and just randomly encounter things until I've built up to the point where I can get through that gate. And, so it basically they'll use like bosses as gated encounters that you can't beat that thing. So you got to play out here. And then once you're past that, then you're in another section of the game. And
I think it's a lot of that. And I think also when you've been in development for a while, game development, you realize, kind of looking from the inside out, just how much stuff is done due to pragmatism.
Oh, you're right.
And
very true.
So, what Greg described and what we're talking about now, like your thing with maybe some random generated stuff, that's a more straightforward way to design something. It's easier to schedule. It's easier to guess at how long it's going to take. And, not to say that like that still isn't very hard. I mean, to pull off a big linear story is no small feat, but it also, by the way, makes what Greg and his team did in 1986 that much more terrifying and amazing that they pulled it off. When you break that, you go non-linear completely and create this basically this state machine that needs to be kept in check at all times. And if any one part of it breaks, the game can't be completed. That's huge, right? And that's why I think too, it's like going back, it's you that chance for things breaking is much less. It's much easier to design for when it's a very linear thing.
Yeah, you want to hear something? Sorry.
Go for it.
Okay, I know we're talking a lot here.
It is.
All right. Yeah, just as Anthony's talking, it makes me realize there's this kind of funny irony as a developer where there's the two ends of the spectrum where that make it really difficult to do what I'm talking about. So I just made the statement that I'm surprised at why I haven't seen more of that. And now I'm going to say why I'm not surprised to see more of that. And it's because either, the fidelity of games have gotten so high, expectations have gotten so high, and and what that means is that the cost of games like AAA games has gotten so high, right? That when you have a huge amount of money at stake, that everybody becomes extremely risk averse. You have to, you've just got, your burn rate is insanely high. You can't be, iterating and trying things and experimenting. You have to be hitting your milestones, and you have to have predictability. So the fact that games have gotten, AAA games have gotten so expensive means that they've had to get very safe and very predictable. So people aren't stepping out. And then at the other end of the spectrum, for indies, indies are always struggling, to get by and just to survive month to month, and doing something aggressive and speculative is very risky and almost impossible at that end. The only place it can really happen is kind of in the middle, where you say you're building a game from $2 million to $4 million or something like that. It's not a $100,000 game, indie game, and it's not a $20 million AAA game. And those middle of the road games have kind of disappeared in our industry. They just don't exist much anymore.
Yeah.
It's all one or the other.
Same with the middle tier publishers. I mean, a lot of them are big guys or small digital publishers now. And yeah, it's very true. So your game has to, team has to stay small and very talented so that if you do get a couple $1 million, you could really make a whiz bang game. And even then it's like a 1 in 10 chance of it doing gangbusters. It's a really bad business to go into, frankly.
What are we doing?
I know, but
with every
so awesome though.
With every developer we talk to, I'm like, why? I sometimes think to myself, why are you putting yourself through this? It just sounds like such a struggle.
The game has to exist, and nobody else is making it.
I get, all these developers are making games they want to play, which is wonderful. But like, I don't know if I could deal with the potential rejection after all that hard work, launching a thing and then having no one care about it. It's just, it's
like
us.
Or just getting washed away by the next Steam sale.
Yeah.
You only last as long as that little wave lasts, and then the next Steam sale hits, and then you disappear.
Yeah, and don't even go there, man. I mean, like the output that Steam is dumping out games right now is
disgusting.
amazing.
It's disgusting.
It's crazy.
It's a super hostile environment,
and that goes right back to what Greg was saying, where it's like, totally.
It's not hostile enough based on quality. It's just it punishes people that spend too long making something.
Like in the last,
if you put in too much effort, you're going to get the same sales as somebody that flipped an asset thing. And
in the last 2 or 3 weeks,
that's true.
In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've seen basically the same asset flip come on Steam as 3 different games.
Yep, it's weird. It's weird when you see that.
Yeah, it's like one was a police game, one was a zombie game, and one was a taxi game or something. But they're all the same game with just a tiny little bit of skin difference. Yeah. It's just...
But for some reason, everyone looks like elves and orcs. Like it's the same asset pack.
It's like it has to be the achievements and the, the
trading
cards and stuff. Because otherwise... I don't see where there's an audience for this stuff. So there has to be something other than the game itself.
I think
that's the only
they
thing
buy a Unity thing that's $20, then they sell it for $1. If they sell 21 units, they made $1.
Yeah, they made their money.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's stupid, but
I'm just saying I would have thought the consumer would have gotten wise to it by now.
There's
enough people.
You're funny.
PT Barnum, right?
The main thing about the trading cards is the aftermarket.
Right.
Because Steam's not going to stop that, because every time any of those cards get sold on the market, they still get their 30% off that sale.
Right.
God. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to happier topics.
Yeah.
So,
we should just go.
I did want to ask.
We were talking about.
Go ahead.
Before they get away from the design thing, so how does Starflight, instead of doing the linear thing, you know, where it's like, okay, we have encounters in a hallway, right, and the player is going to get there, or gating things? Do you just leave the universe open and hope the player stumbles on something, and then
that's kind of what Starflight
the dots
1 and 2 did, right, Greg?
Are we talking about the original Starflight games, or what we were
the original
for the new one? Oh, okay.
I mean, was that just like, here's the universe, good luck, there's stuff out there, maybe you'll find it?
I would describe it as you're let loose in a giant room, like let's say a coliseum or like a convention center, and you have crumbs all over the place leading you to an eventual finale, but the way you follow those crumbs is up to you.
Yeah, but do they point to each other, or you just find it and it's an isolated?
They kind of do. They give clues as to find other breadcrumbs.
Okay, because that's what I wasn't clear about. Is like, if there's a bunch of things that look unconnected until you find enough, and then you realize they're connected, but they don't actually direct you towards, you know, like, hey, you know, if you looked over that direction, you might find the next thing.
No, they do connect. They all connect, and but what makes that hard to see from the outside is that there were a lot of different ways that you could uncover information. For example, there might be information on in some ancient ruins at some location, and some alien race would happen to have the information of that location. But in order to get that information, you would need to have them be friendly or perhaps even obsequious. And then you would learn from another alien race that they knew that, and that, you know, the way to make them obsequious is basically to threaten them, and so there'd be this sort of chain, right, of actions that you'd had to do in order to get that piece of information that would then lead you to something else. But then that information was also somewhere else, some other alien race, for example. And that was the main repository of most of the clue information, was in the different emotional postures of each alien race. And that was really kind of the heart of Starflight in terms of its mechanics. There was a lot of other supporting mechanics where you had to get enough resources, from mining and planet recommendations and collecting, life forms and that sort of thing, or maybe even just to get far enough across the galaxy took you enough fuel, or you had to build up your ship enough to get through the dangers to get there. So there was a bunch of sort of organic gating factors in your growth, but in terms of finding that clue information, that was mostly buried down sort of this sort of network of paths that were mostly embedded in the alien races. And then the thing that I was always most proud of and most excited by when we were building the game was the communication system that we built, and the whole how would you even call it? The AI system, personality simulation system for the alien races, because you would have a variety of things that would push their dial up and down from them being, hostile to neutral to friendly, and then being sort of best friends. And then they had different sorts of fight or flight responses based on the sort of a perceived power ratio of you to them, and how, we had all these stats like that defined every alien race and the machinery of how they moved through these different states. And then every state had its own pool of information that you could access. And so that was kind of under the hood, right? But so you might have to make the Veloxi into best friends in order to get at the really good information that they had. And there were certain ways you had to do that. Like with the Thrin and the Elowan, for example, you would learn what enemies they were of each other and why, because the Thrin would eat the Elowan's head fruit. Remember? Yeah. of the young, right? They considered it like an aphrodisiac or something.
But it's kind of like us with like veal, you know, or something like that, where it's like eating babies.
But then to get the best crew, you had to have one of each.
Yeah, right.
You had to have them on your ship working together.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that was one of those examples of I wasn't sure how that was going to work out. Like when I was like, is this going to work? I wonder, you know, I had a few kind of vague ideas of how you might be able to drop a crew member from your crew. But the saving grace and the reason why it worked, because there was always alternate paths. So if you couldn't get that information from the Thrin, like if you kept an Elowan on your crew and they just would not talk to you anymore, there was still always another way for you to get the information you needed.
And it always felt natural. It always felt like this organic story moving forward that you were a part of. It never felt like I was being pulled in a direction or anything. You know, I always felt like I had agency. It was amazing.
But because of the amount of agency that the player gets, though, I think that in a current game, right, where somebody's designing a thing and they want to tell a story, but if you give the player that much agency, you're giving the player the ability to screw up the game, because it's like, well, if the player needs to have the world in a certain state for this to continue, yet he has made enemies of the people that, you know, it's like he befriended the wrong guy, or like in an RPG, it's like I'm allowed to kill anybody. Well, I went up and I backstabbed this guy and killed him. Little do I know, he's the guy that gives me the quest that actually ends the game, and he's dead.
I don't think I don't know if that's possible in Starflight, because there's
because
many ways.
What he's saying is he had to basically do a lot of redundancy out there, right? Where it's like if you screw this up, it's still over there. So there's no way that you can paint yourself into a corner you can't get out of.
And again, this is why Paul Ritchie recommended to Greg to get a big piece of paper that's going to cover literally most of your work. Like that network, to do that, especially your first game out of the gates, is just so not trivial and is so error prone. Forget the bugs, but Jesus, it's really is impressive when you especially when you peeked inside development like so many of us have.
Yeah, that's why I really didn't know if it was going to work or not. I was as surprised as anybody. And I don't know, you know, it may be that it was possible to get stuck in the game. But I think there were enough, like you said, redundancy, enough alternate paths that it was extremely unlikely. The other question that you just raised, which I find really interesting and kind of want to throw back at you guys, is when you have an open world like that, that's open to that degree where it requires that players really are making choices all the time of what their goals are and what they're going to do and where to go. It requires an awful lot of the player. Like, right, you probably had notes, like reams of notes, right?
Oh my God! So I wrote down every flux entrance and exit, and I wrote down like every time I restart a game, there's always that one planet you go to with the mechans that if you get past them, you make it, you recommend it for colonization. That's a big, huge influx of money right off the bat, and it's easy to get there in the early game. So all just sheets and sheets of notes for this.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, this is I had a Tandy 1000 S. So there was no like, all right, get the star map as a ping, and then let's fire up Photoshop and write our own, coordinates over this thing. It was all hand, pen, and paper. Like
exactly.
It made it that much more cool, I think.
Oh God.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's my question though. Is like, looking at players today, how do you think they would feel about something like that, and current expectations of gaming and general patience for that kind of stuff? What do you think about that?
I will be honest with you. When I tell people that they should play Starflight if they haven't played it before, it's not the story or the openness that I warn them about. It's the archaicness of the interface, because it's very 80s and it's very simple, but it's some people see that as some people have a problem with it because it's so simple. And
well, to be fair, like when you're building your crew, so like you gotta
exactly,
train your crew,
my God, yeah,
assign your crew,
yeah,
and again, no one was doing this yet, so having a back button just wasn't a thing.
No,
so
I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it.
Yeah, no, I know. It's so funny.
There was no UI standards back then. There was barely UIs back then. But I don't warn them about the openness of it, because I think gamers today can handle it if you give them the tools necessary to navigate through it. I think gamers
we
kind of
live in an open world gaming nirvana right now, because
but
everybody wants that open world.
But a lot of open worlds
they don't really
aren't
want
as
it,
open. Yeah, they want the compass telling them exactly where to go, and
and it's like, kid, when I was your age, I had a thing of graph paper sitting on my desk with the damn dungeon on it, and I was trying to figure out in Bard's Tale like which floor tile I stepped on me around.
Oh God, yeah.
And I was going through a closet years ago, and I found that stack of graph paper that was like Bard's
it's the
Tale
best
3, and it was just like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
And I was gonna toss it, and then I was like, I better keep this.
I wish I still had those notes. So many notes of this game.
Yeah, that would be fun to see, wouldn't it?
So maybe that's a stretch goal on your thing. Then is like, if you get, you can order the deluxe edition, which is a physical copy that actually comes with a pad of graph paper.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Now
I think we have to do that.
Now let's talk about the second game. Let's move on a little bit to the second game. So I'm guessing the first game was a hit enough that that they wanted a sequel.
That was the first EA game. That was the first PC game period to go platinum. 1 million copies.
What?
Of Starflight.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It was in every Radio Shack I ever went to back in the day.
Oh yeah, of course. And so I hope that gave him confidence. And that's when EA was like 6 dudes in a closet, man. Like that was a small.
And they were putting out everything. Like, here's a music making game. Here's a pinball game. Here's a Arctic Tank game. Here's everything.
And then here's a universe on a floppy.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, one thing
it's funny too.
Sorry, I wanted to ask one thing about the first game. The only problem I ever ran into with it, bugs wise, really, was the save game feature.
Oh God.
What was up with that? Someone told me it like saved the entire universe state, and that's why it would cause problems. Like, what was the issue with the save game?
Do you remember the details of this? Because I do.
No, you go for it. I don't really remember. I just remember it was a big issue.
Yeah. So what it did was, the reason you had to make you immediately make the backup floppies was because it saved the state of the game into the executable itself. So it rewrote its own COM file. So that is bad, because if you messed up that save state, or if you didn't save properly or something like that, like you could nuke your whole game progress.
And a lot of us did, at least once.
Yeah. And so if you buy, one of the coolest features now is if version of Starflight 1 and 2, they have in Starflight 1 as part of the intro menu, like just, reset to fresh game, because they know it happens. So they've pre-made backup floppies where they just, put them right back in. But because Greg, you weren't coding on the project, so that's why you probably didn't know. But I remember reading about this where, yeah, exactly. And Starflight 2 obviously did not do that. It used save files. But yeah, Starflight 1 actually rewrote its own executable to save its own game, which
crazy.
is so dangerous.
That is so crazy.
So the craziest thing that's like that, super risky deal, right, is I cannot remember what the name of it was. It was some like stunt flight simulator thing that was on the Commodore.
Stunt Island?
No, it's old, like Commodore 64. And on the floppy, but there was the A side and the B side of the floppy, right? So you flip it over.
Oh no.
And there was a competition part of the game. Like once it's like get good and then flip that disc over and you get to play the competition thing.
Oh,
but
no.
if you crash and die, it blanks the disc and you're done.
Oh my gosh.
God, no.
Was that intentional?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, it saves the state and it saves the state in there and you can't do that again.
Is that the original like iron mode for these games?
It's the Dark Souls of Commodore 64.
Dear Lord.
Wow.
Oh,
God, that's brutal.
That hurts. That hurts.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I feel that one. So
compare that to say a game like Skyrim, where if you have a quest giver that dies, what's the reaction? Oh yeah, I'm just gonna mod it back in, resurrect.
Right.
They don't die.
So,
right. Which I'm all for, frankly.
Yeah. So moving on to Starflight 2, because we do need to get to Starflight 3 at some point. So Starflight 1 is a platinum hit. Congratulations. That is wonderful. So what when you start working on Starflight 2, when do you start adding, like, the big things were like trade, that was amazing, and the nebula. Like, were those the things you had right from the get-go that you wanted in the second game? Or were there other things that like had to be cut? Like, how was the process going from 1 to 2?
When we did game 2, that was just me and Bob Gonsalves, just the two of us. So we, we built on, of course, the system of game 1, but we had to be kind of selective about how many new mechanics we could add because it was just the one engineer. Bob was amazing, but he's just Bob. And so in terms of mechanics, the trade was probably the biggest single new mechanic in that game. And we did have, like you said, the nebula and the continuum fluxes and
time travel,
traveling around that.
Time travel, yes.
Right. Time travel. And but the story was kind of the main thing, that was really and the new alien races, that was where most of our effort went. And like you probably remember in game 1, the story was really kind of a contextual shift in terms of your sense of time, right? Because the whole idea behind it was you're collecting Endurium throughout the whole thing. There's this wave.
You mean you're killing the ancients? Sorry, I'm still not over that. Sorry, I will never get over that.
Yeah. So
you're the bad guy.
And there's conflict going on because, right, there's the whole wave of aliens moving from spinward to outward, and this kind of, as stars are flaring in this band moving outwards. And so all of these races are kind of fleeing, and the most aggressive ones are sort of are being aggressive and causing problems. And so that's sort of the ostensible problem in the beginning. But then you find out, well, why are the stars flaring? It's because the ancients have been causing that. And then, of course, at the end, you find out, the ancients are actually defending themselves against carbon life, because they are a different type of. They're a silicon-based life form that lives in a different kind of time frame, a much, much slower time. And when carbon-based life appeared it first appeared in the galaxy, to them, it was kind of like a flash, right? Carbon-based life, like bacteria, lived so fast and burned so hot, they were like this disease that was spreading across the galaxy and specifically destroying them. And so they were using this, the star flaring wave to basically try to protect themselves. So you find out that you've been burning them in your spaceship the entire game,
Jesus.
and that your whole species, that you're the aggressor.
We're assholes.
So that was game.
We're assholes.
Right? So that was playing with the idea of time, right, and their sense of time, because they operated in a very different time frame than we did, the carbon life, and it was hard to even communicate or perceive in the same way as them. And then in game 2, it was kind of the same idea, but just shifted out of time into space, with the idea that the Ool were this giant, like parsecs wide being, and the Ool would essentially get infected by the life forms within their body, as their body sort of spread out over parsecs. And so they would basically either destroy them with their own kind of antibodies, or they would basically subsume them. And that's what how the Lek became the Oolek. And you find out in game 2 that the Ool are really this is this being that operates on a different order of space. So that was kind of, just took from the first game the idea of time and shifted it in the second story into this trying to kind of get you to think in a new way about space and what life and existence, all that stuff.
The scale of it all.
Right. The scale of it all. Right.
And Starflight 1 and 2 did really teach you about scale more than any other game.
Yeah, right.
Because my God.
Right.
Now, I want to take a few side trips before we get to Starflight 3. First, there was the Genesis version of Starflight 1, which was amazing. Like, I never played it until like maybe 5 years ago, and I was shocked at how good it was. Like, I was expecting it to be garbage because, it's
in the exact same boat. Yep.
It's on the console, but no, it was, I think, maybe better than the DOS version. Because, like, the first time I tried to land, I thought the ship was going to do it itself. Nope.
It is a wake-up call. Yeah.
Boing! You're damaged. What? Oh, crap.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A number of people, they actually preferred that version to the PC version.
I actually tell people, if they're going to play Starflight for the first time, emulate that one. Because I think that's the most approachable one out of the original game.
It is the most approachable. Yeah, man. I'll say it's the most approachable. I too, like you, didn't play it until literally a few years ago. I still have the PC version, the most. I think just because like that gave me the truest sense of like, I like the arcade elements and the skill-based elements in the Genesis one, for sure. But like the landing and that kind of jazz, and gravity, is just wonderful how it affects that. But one thing I do definitely love more about the Genesis version is that opening title screen music. We have gotten so many requests for that music in the Starflight 3 campaign. It's funny and merited, and it's totally merited. It's really good.
It's funny. I bought the cartridge because I wanted the manual, because the manual includes like a lot of hint stuff that the other manuals didn't, and someone gave me a Genesis just so I could play.
Oh, nice!
I've been playing it on my TV. It's really great. But there was also, is this true that the game Protostar was kind of a Starflight 3 or supposed to be? That's what I've heard over the years, but I'm not entirely sure. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely, the name of the game is familiar. There was never any kind of official relationship that I was aware of.
Okay.
Be that it was inspired by Starflight, quite possibly. But I never had any involvement with that myself.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that one because I'd heard over the years that was like an unofficial Starflight 3.
Yeah, I've never heard that lore, but maybe
it's nowhere near as good. It's completely bat crap, but yeah, that's just what I've heard. And are you final thing? Are you guys aware of the fan made game that came out a little while back called I think it's the Last Colony or the Lost Colony?
Yeah. Yeah, I was in contact with them back some years ago when they were doing that, and they were really nice people. I mean, just uber enthusiastic and very respectful. And they had asked whether or not they could, make the game. They'd asked whether or not they could sell it. I had said to them, well, one, I don't own the rights to Starflight, and so I was sort of a conduit between Rod McConnell, the fellow that does own the IP, and them. But they had a bunch of questions about the aliens, and I was always happy to answer those. But yeah, they were. It was just made clear to them that they were free to go ahead and do that, but they just had to make sure that it was, publicly known that it was a fan game and not the official game. Because I think we always thought, I know Rod did and I did too, that we might want to do an official one someday. So
speaking of,
exactly,
let's get to that. Is he involved in this new one? Are any of the original guys involved in the new one?
Oh, well, not specifically. Rod still owns the IP. He's mostly retired these days, but he's given us our blessings. We have a contract with him, to go ahead and make a new game. And he's when I asked him, I think his exact words to me were, oh my gosh, Greg, you are Starflight. Of course, whatever you want to do. So he is, Rod hired me straight out of college when he had absolutely no reason to have faith in me. And then he made me lead designer of this project. And I am forever grateful to that guy. He's always be kind of a hero of mine. And so, and then as to the others, on the project, there were people that kind of came and went. I mentioned Dave Bolton, or there was another engineer, Rich Dugan. But the main crew that was there for for most of the project and that saw it to the end was me and Rod and Alec and Bob and Tim Lee. And I'm still friends with all of them. We still, are in touch with each other.
You're the only one still in the game business, right?
But I'm the only one making games still. Yeah, right. Yeah, Tim showed up here at my office a few months ago when I told him we were going to run the Kickstarter with a box full of notebooks and notes that I had no idea still existed. All of my old scribblings and original, story ideas and maps and everything was in there. It's been really fun for me and Anthony to kind of look through all of that.
Oh man, it's been heaven for me. And in fact, if you look at on the Fig campaign, in one of the updates, I post a picture that I purposely posed of some of the juiciest stuff from Greg's archives. And one thing that was immediately called out was Greg's original handwritten piece of graph paper where he designed the Interstell logo, which is pretty freaking rad. So there's crates of it. I've got four Rubbermaid crates of binder upon binder upon binder of Greg's handwritten notes.
Amazing stuff that was written back then.
You should do an add-on to the Fig campaign where people can chip in to have all that scanned, like pay a document company to scan all of it and have it like as a digital extra. I would pay money. I would chip in extra money on top of my pledge for that. I'm not even kidding.
That's cool. Yeah, no, and a lot of people echo the same, regardless of my role in the project, just as a fan. Yeah, and I've got those things saved tucked away. The plan, by hook or by crook, is to get those things scanned. And I got some buddies at the Video Game Historical Foundation and some other pals in the industry. So yeah, I'm gonna coordinate with Greg and see how we can do that. I would love to just be able to release those PDFs and get them to people who would just love nothing more than to pour over those for hours.
I would pour over those. I would sit on the toilet for days and just read that on my phone. For
again,
days.
imagery, not that I was looking for, but
that's where I do all my reading.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I told Greg, I'm like, Greg, I'm going to take all these, for archives and for reference for the game. And he obviously was like, no, it sounds great. Where I'm trying to, simplify and that kind of stuff. So the real reason though, is basically it's my nighttime reading now, and my wife's a little concerned about it, but I don't care. I did it for totally selfish reasons to get these old notes. So
it's pretty
awesome.
So now how much of the new game has been made at this point? Are we still in like very early alpha? Like, because we've seen a little tiny sliver of footage, and that's
right.
And that's
right. So where we're at now is we've got a prototype, which is a composition of a couple different scenes that we've made in the new game. And that is really, I guess if you had to put this on a development schedule, it would be in the discovery / pre-production phase. So again, not even alpha, man, like really early prototypes.
Wow.
And the reason is because we've broken them down into like, look, you're going to make a modern Starflight game. So you're going to break the mold in some places, but there's still a structure that you're probably going to follow. And we figured that at a minimum, we're going to have planetary exploration, solar system navigation, and galactic navigation, right? So we just started there and just built those scenes to start experimenting with those. And that's where you see landing on the planet, taking off from the planet, capturing some creatures and that kind of stuff. So there's a quick alien interaction there. And so we have that stuff, and that's what we're trying to keep those. I believe they're not separate from each other right now, to just sort of try and find the fun in each type of scenario. While Greg he's already written the story arc for the game, and that's probably the most closely guarded secret on the project, which Greg loves to talk about. And I think that's exactly why
I want to hear it right now. I just lay it out for me.
Greg can tell you some stuff, but I'm authorized to pull the trank gun if I need to. So,
son of a gun.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say too much, although I definitely, it is, as Anthony can attest to, a bit of a liability of working with me, because I do tend to blab. But I can tell you how it starts out. Maybe is that
It's a start. It's something. Yeah. I'll take whatever I can get. Any little crumb, I will take it.
So I will tell you that it's very big and deep and kind of cosmological, but it doesn't seem to start that way initially. It starts with a very immediate situation where the planet that you're on has come under quarantine. There's a disease that's spreading where everybody's basically turning stupid, and and turning essentially kind of anti-science, and science is sort of starting to almost go backwards, and you find out that this disease is actually not exclusive to just the planet that you're on, and in fact, not even just to humans, that other alien races seem to get this disease. And there's some organization that is responsible for, they say, for safeguarding sentient species, because this disease only hits sentients and seems to only hit them at a certain level in their development. You are quarantined, but you find a way off of the planet, and you start digging into what's causing this. And in fact, you're even at risk yourself. Some of the people that you encounter may have this disease. It also makes you and other aliens laugh at random times for no apparent rational reason.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, it makes humans have a little stubby little spotted tail too that they try to hide. Right. So you can always tell someone who's got the disease.
It's like the old V show, You know, you would get the green on your neck if you were, pregnant or something like that with a visitor.
Yeah, I shouldn't go too much further down the road, but I will just say that things are not what they seem. Pretty much nothing is, and the story kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and there are these question marks like right from the beginning that don't seem like they could possibly have any answer at all. For example, there are artifacts that you find that seem to be older than the age of the universe, which makes absolutely no sense.
It doesn't add up. Yeah.
But there's reasons for all of it, and one of the things that we wanted to achieve with this story was to give you a really compelling reason to learn about the perspectives of every alien race you encounter in terms of what their beliefs are, what they think life is all about, what the universe is in fact, and everybody has their interesting alien views and perspectives and how they look at things, and we wanted to really highlight the sort of alienness of like so many science fiction stories. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I feel like they're often they often feel like just people in alien suits, right? But then every now and then you'll read a really good science fiction novel or even more. And there's plenty of them out there, but really good science fiction movies are harder to find, and really good science fiction games are even harder to find, right? Where it's not just like, aliens that could just as well be people. They just look weird and they've got laser guns and right. But you'll see a movie like Arrival. See that? You remember that one?
I've not. Was that Arrival? Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not seen that. I've not.
Wonderful movie.
That's what I keep hearing. I just have not gotten around to seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the only example of that, but it's just the one that kind of comes to mind of an example of sort of alien perspectives and trying to get into the mind of how they see things, and so you sort of twist your mind around into a new shape of how they perceive, and all of a sudden things kind of become clear from their perspective. That was one of the things that kind of intrigued me and Anthony a lot about what we wanted to achieve in this story. So we almost went about it sort of upside down with that first in mind, and then crafting a story that would allow you and almost force you to have to really get into the mindset of all of these different alien races to sort of understand, because there's kind of a common thread. Once you start doing that, you realize that there's some truth buried into all of their points of view and all of their histories and stuff, that where you solve this mystery of what's really kind of happening.
Right. And that sort of is a nice point of connection back to Starflight 1 and 2. One thing that was a limitation of the time was a lot of these things that Greg and his team overcame with, the generation of the universe, planets, even placement of characters and that kind of stuff. But you couldn't get a sense of like, where'd the Veloxi live? Like, if you were just a fly on a wall, what are you witnessing? It's not just their words, a la Star Trek, when you hail them and they appear on your view screen. Like that's something that and again, it's, with this idea of the story, this perception of an alien perception of its existence is so much different than just sight, sound, smell, and voice that we associate. And so how do you wrap that into this game and this story with that sense of wonder? And again, it's in our opinion, I think one of the best ways to really give you a jumping off point to say you want immersion, you want really to be dropped into the sandbox, face first, here you go. Like, how do you observe a truly alien species and understand what the heck they're trying to convey to you while this weird sickness is going on, while this organization is out to get you, them, maybe, and somebody else, maybe not, I don't know. And so, it's this component that is just so big And just like in Starflight 1 and 2, it's got to permeate every single piece of the game. It has to feel like it's percolating up from the surface, from the bottom, not being, going down a rail, if that makes any sense. But
No, it totally does. It totally does.
kind of like, I meant going on a rail of a story, but yeah.
I do have a couple of questions, because gamers are different now than they were in 1986 or 89. And we don't have the patience or the time, because one, there are a lot more games, but two, we just don't have the patience anymore. So
yeah,
how do you make the universe still feel huge and expansive while not so much so that the user might get frustrated or bored?
Greg, I got this. So you heard it here first. The game is going to be purely free to play with nothing but skins and loot crates. No.
That was the best part about Starflight 1 and 2 is all the DLCs included.
I love getting the hats. The Velox had such great hats. They really did.
Yeah, exactly. You need them hats. We're going to charge for different ammo types. It's going to be amazing. No.
Yes. Planet Loot Crate. I want to find Planet Loot Crate. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Greg had the great idea of just every paragraph, a new PayPal button comes up and you just hit the 15 cents. You get more and more of the story. No, I'm kidding. So obviously that is all a joke. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Greg, and I know you got some great thoughts, but one thing to me is I feel that gamers aren't as impressed as they used to be. No Man's Sky is a great example.
True.
Their technological feat of generating 48 quadrillion stars and all this stuff is meh. I think it's very impressive, right? But players were kind of like, cool, meh. Yeah, I mean, again, that game is wildly successful and deserves it all. But yeah, it's a toughie. I do think having a common thread of story and world is still, as a good story, no matter what the medium, is always the way.
Right, but one thing I was thinking on is like the planets in Starflight 1 and 2. The planets are massive. Like, if you want to do a whole thing, you got to take off and land multiple times. You can't do it in a rover, Mm-hmm. Are you planning on having the planets still that kind of same or similar scale? Because Starflight games more recently have really abstracted that a lot. You know what I mean?
How do you feel?
The reason why those planets were big, and the reason why that's probably important, and I think we would do the same thing again in terms of scale, was because then you can hide stuff. Then it's really critical, right? Then you have to get the information of where you're going. Otherwise, you just go and you just cover all the terrain and you find it,
right?
And you don't need to follow.
That's a good point.
If we give somebody like a new TV that can is like a hovercraft, it can float on air with unlimited fuel, that's gonna suck fast, because to Greg's point, it makes the world small and everything will be found pretty easily. So
yeah, too, in regards to your question about what will satisfy players now, that's always a really hard question to answer, and I think the way I've generally chosen to approach that over the years, and I think probably you're the same, Anthony, is that you just make a game that you wish you had to play. You kind of have to be a fan first. You have to just love it and really, really want it, and then visualize, if I could have anything, what would I want? What am I dying to play? And I know for me in this realm, the answer is good science fiction. That is like a story that's so interesting and so compelling, aliens that are so fascinating and so alien, and things that make sense. Once I can figure them out, that's what would I know would drive me forward and keep me playing. I personally, I don't really care how big the universe is. I mean, I want it big enough so that I can have the illusion of freedom, that I can go where I want and not feel like I'm on rails. I don't really care if I really am on rails or not. I just don't ever want to notice them. And what I really want, though, is purpose. It's like a sense of story, because that's what I look for in science fiction, So, here's a funny illustration. Like, imagine that you could create the most effective, efficient, and impressive open world simulation game ever. Like, imagine that, in fact, somebody had, and we're in it right now. Right. This game is so good that it's almost impossible to tell the difference between this and reality. And then ask the question, okay, so what do I do? How do I win? What's my sense of purpose? How fun is this game? Right. All of a sudden you realize it doesn't matter how good the simulation is, how complete the open worldness of it is, or how big and extensive it is. What matters is the meaning that you're looking for, the sense of purpose that you have, and that kind of causality that drives you forward. Same as in life, as in a game. Yeah, right.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly, the devil is in the details. Again, it's just like your own neighborhood. When you go home, you're not worried about what's going on in Bangkok. Like, you're gonna go every night. Either gonna eat at home, or you're gonna go to your local bar, or you're gonna go whatever. Like, people tend to just do that, right? For mostly for pragmatic reasons of not being super rich and can just fly out to Bangkok. But when you start thinking about these things, like, what's the point? Like, I don't care if I have a perfect globe of a billion cities to go visit. I just want to worry about what I have to do for myself.
I do worry about what goes on in Bangkok.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I do too.
My fiance's in Bangkok, so.
Oh. Okay, so bad example.
Okay, yeah.
But, I'm just saying, if a monster came and you had to choose a city to get eaten, no, I'm kidding. But yeah. Yep, exactly. So it's a non-trivial problem to solve, but that one exercise alone has really helped keep us focused on what the goal is, and gives us kind of a thing to design towards.
Mm-hmm.
So how many of the original races are in the new game? I mean, even if you can't say them all, we know the Velox are in there. Who else?
We do.
Mm-hmm. Who else might be making an appearance that you can actually tell us about?
We don't know yet, but there are, and we're still, it's one of the things we would actually probably reach out to our fans, assuming we get lucky enough to get funded and actually get to build this thing. We're going to be throwing a lot of questions out to the fans.
Yeah.
Of what do you want? That's one of the very first questions, is like, who would you like to see, in here make a comeback? I think there are some that are kind of obvious. Right, so the Veloxy would be one obvious one, and probably who doesn't love a Spemen?
Right. I mean, one of the most iconic things in the game.
I have a particular penchant for the Tandaloo Eshve and the Tandaloo Eshvara. I think they.
I love them. Yeah, they were great. With their,
they were
the ones with the masks, right? With the
the masks, right? And they're very meticulous. The manner of doing things exactly the right way.
Absolutely.
Which was and
they'd
have fight these endless wars over the stupidest things.
Yeah. For me, I was always a sucker for the sad sacks of the Dweenal.
The Dweenal,
right?
The whiners.
They're just like the Eeyores of the universe.
You wanted to give them a hug, though. You really wanted to hug them.
But then they were jerks to you. So it's kind of like, take your Nidberries and get out of my face. just take your Nidberries. I don't even want them. I don't know, but it helps us all.
Well, I'm exceedingly happy that at least the Velox are going to make an appearance, because they're the best. They are.
Oh yeah, they were fun. They're fun to ride. I really enjoyed.
Oh, I bet
the way they talk. So I think they'd have to be there. That's another fun thing. I'm looking forward to, again, if we get the opportunity, focusing a lot of attention on the communications and how that works. I'm fascinated with language. I got my degree way back when in linguistics, biolinguistics, and my goal actually was to do communication research with marine mammals, and I was positioning myself to be the guy they called in to talk to the aliens when the aliens landed. No, no lie. That was my
That would be awesome.
That was my plan before I got kind of sidetracked and never went back to grad school, because I thought I'll just take one more year to do games. But so that's always been a fascination of mine. It is to this day, language and communication. I speak Thai and Japanese and a little bit of French.
Wow.
And I love that stuff, and figuring out, how language impacts the way you think, and how you think impacts your language, and what communication might mean, and how you might need to learn to speak to these aliens. And then, of course, making it a little bit absurd and funny, and doing the same kind of satirical caricatures that we did in the original games. That's all going to be a joy if we manage to get to that.
Well, I hate to ask this particular question, but do you have a plan B if you don't make your goal?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead and answer that
sure. We always have to have a exit strategy, right? And so for us, we've talked about a lot of different options, and honestly, right now is what we would do is, continue on with the projects that we're working on, and devoting the time between those projects to probably beefing up a demo a little bit better, a little bit more, be able to show more to not just the fans, but to potential publishing partners. And so how long that would take, what kind of time we could do, we don't know. As you know, the studio is focused right now on shipping Toe Jam and Earl.
Right.
And so that's a big chunk of everyone's time. But yeah. So honestly, it would be basically flesh it, maybe go back to the drawing board, listen to what everyone was talking about, the fans were saying during the whole campaign, which has been phenomenal, and kind of reassess the design and see if we can make a kind of a focused MVP, minimum viable product or something, for the game.
Well, what
alien species are Toe Jam and Earl, and will they be appearing in the new Starflight?
That's funny. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. We totally could, and we might just decide to
People would
put a little surprise in there.
that.
What was that family? I think it was Starflight 2, where it was like the Hensons, the Hendersons.
Yeah, there was the Johnsons were in there.
The Johnsons, right? And they were like a hippie. They were like the Johnson family, these humanoids on this planet, right? And they had the Nidberries.
Yeah, right.
Because my point is, like, something like that with TJ&E would be rad, because it's like it was this random planet. You're like, the Johnsons, okay, cool, and like it is out of everything. Universe was like, hey, we're the Johnsons.
They're like farmers.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. Like, it's not hippies either; they're farmers. It was so cool. So I don't know. I always imagine something like that, like a planet where it's like, maybe not necessarily funkatroned out, but like Toe Jam and Earl there for whatever reason. Maybe the ship has landed and they're hanging out, having some.
Yeah, it depends. It would be fun to take it even farther and actually have you be able to communicate with them, and it's all just a question of time and assets and that we need to create, and of course money. But it sure would be fun, and like I said, we are at total liberty to do that. Me and Mark Vorsanger own the TJ&E IP, and Rod owns the Starflight IP, so there's no like legal hurdles. It's just a question of what would be fun and what can we afford to do. We actually I actually almost put, or I should say, Anthony was working on Doki Doki Universe with me, almost put Toe Jam and Earl into Doki Doki Universe. We actually had the whole planet ready, all of the artwork, all of the assets, the stories written for, and everything. We had the okay from Sony to put them in, but then at the last minute, Sony legal got kind of nervous, despite the fact that me and Mark own the IP, and there really wasn't an issue. Lawyers just get kind of nervous about that kind of thing. They just want to play it safe, and so they asked us to take it out, so we did. But Yeah, you know, they have a lot on the line, and you've got to respect their sense of what they're comfortable with. But you know, it was a little bit of a bummer at the time because I thought that would be a fun little shout out. But that's kind of leaves it open now. Toe Jam will do make a cameo. It'll be fun because it'll be the first time they do that. So,
are they the only members of their species, or is there like a whole planet of Toe Jam minerals?
Oh, there's a whole planet of Funkatronians. Yeah, yeah, Smoot and Tebow and Charla and Lawanda, old Otis. Yeah, from
man.
Funkatron.
I shudder to think, but if I went Googling, I'm sure that there is a rich fan fiction.
Oh God, help us all! But yes, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, if you're flying along Starflight 3 through space, and all of a sudden you start to hear some bass line that sounds like Brothers Johnson or something, you'll know you're getting close to Funkatron.
You make the mothership connection. And
I have to admit, I've never played one of those games. I apologize.
No, that's totally cool. You know, I suggest you just hold out a little longer and full on best of all of them combined in this new one. So
that's right.
It's coming soon.
Is it coming to PC?
What if?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
That was
okay.
what we did.
Good. Okay. Great.
What if we could actually like meet the leader of their planet, and it's Bootsy Collins?
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that.
Did you ever see the old Greg thing that they did on? It was the Mighty Bush. If not, I'll send you a link to it. It's got a Bootsy Collins segment where
I sometimes feel
Bootsy Collins found the funk that fell from space, and that's how he formed Parliament.
I sometimes feel like you're the only person that's seen that because I've never known anyone else to recommend it. To be honest with you. Now, which engine, are you building the new game upon, or is it a custom jobby? Because it's got to be a big one.
You mean Starflight 3?
Starflight 3, yes. Which engine?
Yeah. So, I think very few guys trying to roll their own when they're. So we're using Unity right now. It's been great.
Okay.
You know, it's not final. You know, we're talking about it's basically going to boil down to Unity or Unreal, but Unity has been good, and Unity, I believe, is what Toad TJ&E is in. So a lot of shared knowledge there. It'd be kind of, you know, again, although we're not 100%, it'd be kind of foolish to sort of ignore some of that kind of shared and learned knowledge on the engine.
And will it have multiplayer? That's what everyone's going to ask you. No, I know it's not, but everyone is going to ask you that.
So right now, it's definitely a single player experience. We want to focus on that. We do have ideas for how we could meaningfully, for how we could meaningfully do multiplayer, but it's very much focused on a single player experience right now. That's definitely like anything else is just sort of cool what ifs that we have in the back of our head. They're not being planned for development.
Yeah, you know, the lead engineer who's good friends with Anthony and also, of course, a big fan. He's very experienced in network play and multiplayer play, and he really wants to do it. And if, you know, again, it just comes down to what we can afford to do. I can attest after having just been through this on Toe Jam and Earl that it's not an undertaking. You know, you don't take that on lightly. It's you know. It just takes time and money, so it just depends what we have to work with.
Yeah, it's totally fair. I mean, I get annoyed that everyone asks that question, so I just thought I'd ask it in jest. Like, when are you gonna add co-op? It's like, just shut up. Not every game needs co-op.
It's a valid question. I mean, and again, you look at the modern landscape. You know, I mean, forget it, dude. You know, even these quote unquote. Like the Hello Games doing with No Man's Sky. EVE Online is like just the ultimate in all, you know, MMOs. So anything sci-fi, you're definitely going to be talking multiplayer at some point. So totally valid question.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because it's just kind of a fun question. If we had presented Starflight 3 as a, you know, as an MMO, as a shared universe experience, how do you think that would have been perceived in contrast to, you know, to a single player story-esque experience? Do you think that would have been a better position to take?
I don't think so, because with the Starflight games, it's like you're the guy, you're the crew that's saving the universe. And how do you make an MMO out of that? Is everyone saving the universe?
Right, it's like a Star Wars Galaxies problem. Like, not everyone can be a Jedi.
Yeah, or an Elder Scrolls Online problem. I mean, Elder Scrolls Online is a great game, but it's like we all can't be the Dragonborn, so we're all just running around, you know, as a guy doing a thing. So I think if it was an MMO, it might take something away from it. Like, now maybe if you made it like some kind of prequel where there was a galactic empire thousands of years ago that actually existed, you know, where there was this busy universe. But I mean, part of the great thing about the Starflight games is how alone you felt. You know, even though there were these other races to were into, a lot of times it's just you and the blackness, and it was it made it feel that much bigger and scarier. You know, and it's not like a scary game, but it just made it that much more awesome, that much more full of awe. And so I'd worry that making it an MMO might take away from that a little bit. I'd still back it. I mean, you could put the Starflight name in a match 3 game, and I would freaking back it. I don't know what that would entail. Match the Endurium. I don't know.
Yeah, we're writing that down though. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, make that make that an arcade game in the starport, like at the bar.
Yeah,
if you put a bar in there.
Yeah, dude.
We will. We'll dedicate it to you. We'll have your name on the arcade,
but
on the cabinet. Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying, and you know, it wouldn't be the same game. We'd have to be willing to kind of walk away from a number of the core things that made that Starflight experience what it was. But nevertheless, you know, in this business, you have to be pragmatic. And if that's the sort of thing that people would want enough to fund and would let us get off the ground, and we could build that, whereas, you know, it would be much harder to do what we're trying to do. It's kind of, you know, hindsight now because we're down this path, but ultimately you go where where whatever will work, you know, whatever you can make work. And we would make that, you know, shared universe, a Starflight-esque universe, and try to come up with a whole lot of ways to let people have a story-like experience in there. It would be quite a challenge to let people have different stories that kind of overlapped and intersected. And, you know, again, we'd have to do a lot of creative thinking and R&D. But, you know, it's certainly doable and exciting in kind of different ways than what we're trying to do. And mostly now I ask the questions just because I'm curious.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's really rare that we get asked questions on this on this podcast. So that's fascinating. I liked it. I liked it actually. I liked it. But nice. I mean, also if you went the MMO route, you'd be like, it's not EVE Online. You know, I mean, it'd be tough to compete with that juggernaut.
It's true.
You know.
Yeah, that is
right. It's just the resources they have. Forget it. And it's funny. Like my buddy I used to work with really played Dota 2 all the time. Probably still does. And I was like, man, there's got to be that's a big pie. You know, can't we get a piece of that League of Legends Dota 2 action? And it's just like, you could try.
Yeah,
but
everyone's been trying. Everyone's been trying.
Yeah. And the cost of admission is extremely high.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
And we see, and honestly, we do see a good amount of space games coming out that are multiplayer only. They're either like arena-based or small MMOs, and they don't do well a lot of the time. Because they just don't build an audience, I guess. I'm not sure entirely why. I mean, I think it's because there's not enough single-player content. In these games, it's just, you know, arena.
Well, and you start to rely more on mechanics, right? Like if you can't scale up, you have to rely on mechanics. And although mechanics is a huge part of Starflight, you know, you got to find the fun, make that interesting while you're going to explore the story, right? But still, that's why, you know, having a story that's got this nice thread to it or multiple threads, as we've talked about, that's something we can grasp, not just in our minds, but also just in our development team, that the kind of team that we're targeting for this and the size of that is something like, sure, there's some, if we find some cool ideas for network multiplayer, you bet, man, we'll definitely consider it if it works. But it's something that's just, it's just too tough to try and figure out.
Yeah, I can't even, my brain, just trying to think of how you would make that work, something like this work as a multiplayer game, my brain starts to hurt. It just sounds so big.
And it would be so fun to like try and R&D. But, if we had a little bit bigger of a money hose, we could probably do that. But we don't. Who am I kidding? We don't even have a money hose. So we don't have a money squirt gun. So.
Yeah, Paul on YouTube says multiplayer melee like Star Control. And that, I think it's kind of been done. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like you have a game like Subspace that's been going for 21 years. That's very kind of melee Star Control-y. And then you have some newer games that no one played. I don't want to mention names. That no one played because people look at it and go, oh, look, I see on Steam no one's playing this. It doesn't have bots. Forget it.
Right.
So
right, and that whole infrastructure to build out bots and blah blah blah.
Oh my god.
It really can take away from what we're trying to focus on, which is the next solid chapter in Starflight.
Yeah, and Melee from Star Control as a model, it certainly would be fun. Like you said, I think that's been done. We could model that even more strongly, though, and I got to say that if people ask me what my favorite games have been over time and what I've spent the most time playing, that game, Melee in Star Control, is probably my all-time favorite game in terms of the amount of hours I spent playing that. I
never knew that. That's cool.
Yeah, well, Paul. We talked about Paul Ritchie already. He and I we shared offices back in those days, and then after sharing a tiny office together, we were across the hall from each other for years, and we had this fierce, very playful melee competition going all the time. And the rest of the people working with Paul and working with me would stand around and watch us play every day as we sat down to face off again. And but that said, and like Anthony was just pointing at, Starflight was really about story. And like you said, how do you do that in a multiplayer context? It would certainly be challenging. That's exactly the kind of challenge, though, that I find really exciting, because it pushes the boundaries of what interactive experience can offer. And I just love it when people take on a challenge like that and try to do something truly new. And I love having opportunities like that as well. But it's hard. It's hard to come by those opportunities in this business, that's so risk averse, and you're always having to, kind of scrape to get enough money to hit your deadlines and bootstrap, so we'd need some big pockets in order to really do justice to exploring that space. But oh man, what an opportunity that would be.
Well, I just thought of a way it could work. Maybe the only way it would work is kind of like a bridge cruise style thing where you're all co-op on the same ship doing different things.
Like Pulsar.
Lost
Colony.
Exactly. But you're in this massive universe where you're like, so it's kind of like Borderlands-y, where you're co-oping all toward the same goal, and you're all moving together toward the same universe, but you're all on the same ship. So maybe that could work, but that might be the only way that might be the only way I think that you keep the story and the focus.
Absolutely. And again, that could totally work, because you solve that problem working toward same goal, right? Like there's still one savior team that's in this whole universe versus everyone's the savior. Well, that can't work.
Exactly.
You got run into you still got to figure out like how to do what if you only got 4 out of 5 people? Is that a bot? Is that bot any good? AI is really hard for this kind of stuff. So it's, just the R&D time is
so what happens when, you don't want to play for a week and the other people do.
Right.
Do they continue the story and you just kind of miss out, and then you come back and the story's almost done? It's also not a massive multiplayer experience, which is what we were kind of speculating about. But I do still feel like a multiplayer experience, even limited like that, is possible.
Sure.
The questions that we're posing are hard questions, but they're not impossible to solve or answer. And it would sure be fulfilling, wouldn't it? That's kind of the dream. Back when we made Starflight 1, Rod had this this idea, this fantasy. I don't know if I should even call it a fantasy, because he really was planning to pursue this, what he called theater gaming, where he wanted to, rent out theaters and have people come as the crew with different skills and have consoles, and on a giant theater screen have the common view of what's going on, whereas everybody had their own consoles. And he actually wanted to get money and build this and make a Starship experience for people who could come regularly to something like this. And of course,
it's sort of an Artemis thing. Then
it's sort of what?
Sort of like Artemis. Because that's the bridge thing that they get out at conventions. It's
that's what
Tom,
we did with Quintet.
Right on that. But Tom from Interplay wrote Artemis and has been run on conventions and stuff. And then there's another guy that's working on another thing that's sort of a different angle of it.
There's a few.
There's multiple projects.
Yeah, I've heard of these since then, and Rod was a little bit of a visionary, because this was back in the mid 80s when he wanted to do this.
There's a company in France right now, because they call them this particular thing, they call it like an escape room, because it's just like you go into this room and it's an environment, and in this case it's a submarine, and it's like a steampunk submarine, so you're like on the Nautilus, and then everybody actually has to like watch the gauges and spin the dials and stuff, but all the like the view out the porthole, you're looking at an LCD monitor. But it's like when you're in the room, it's like you might as well be on the Nautilus. And unfortunately, everything that they've said and done is in French, and I don't speak a lick of French, but it's beautiful to look at.
It sounds awesome.
It sounds cool, yeah.
Yeah, it's VR without the helmet.
Yeah, right.
That's so cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll throw you a link to it. It's worth seeing.
Yeah, so there are ways to do it, right? There's ways to but it all takes money, and it takes experimenting, and and it's not going to come out of indie gaming, and it's probably not going to come out of AAA gaming either.
Until some indie proves it could work,
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, if the campaign isn't successful, and I hope it is, and we want it to be, of course, but if it's not, we'll still be here as long as it takes to make Starflight 3. Now that we know it's going to happen, take as much time as you need. You've already waited.
Yeah, man.
We've already waited 29 years since Starflight. Is that the math? 29? Yeah, 29 years since 30, Starflight 2. Yeah. So almost 30. Oh my god. I feel so old. But we will wait if that's what it takes. So
thanks, guys. That's awesome.
Oh god.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we're going to try to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have a feeling, because a lot of I'm in internet marketing, so I watch a lot of Kickstarters and I back a lot of Kickstarters, and a lot of them get a lot of their funding in the last 48 hours. They get that reminder email, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, I have to fund this," and then boom, huge influx of pledges. I'm really hoping that happens, because this is the most expensive crowdfunding project I've backed. I'll tell you what.
Nice. Thanks, man. Yeah, we're hoping you're hoping to hit the end of that bathtub curve, as say, with the funding, pretty hard. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Here's a weird question. Is the box art for Starflight 2 canon? What does that even mean?
As opposed to other box art?
I'm not what Paul Potvin over.
I guess
on,
how can it
like?
I think what that means is are the way the aliens and ships depicted on that cover really officially approved? Are they correct? That's what I would assume that means. That cover was painted by what's his last name? Sean, artist named Sean. He was a really talented artist. Kind of difficult to work with, but amazingly talented. And I loved his interpretation of the different aliens. He did a humana on there.
That was great art.
Just great.
I love the art. I love the art on that box. Yeah. I keep seeing someone has like on eBay a framed poster size version of that. I keep meaning to buy it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I keep meaning to buy it. I know. I want it. I keep meaning to get it.
So I'd say it became canon as soon as he did it.
Okay.
Like he defined what they looked like, and since then I was like, yep, that's what they look like. Because this is awesome.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Paul owns the piece of art. I was just talking the framed version, the big framed version of the box cover. He apparently owns that, so that's awesome.
Oh,
that's
very cool.
Now I need to get one. That's really all there is. Now I need to get one. That's all there is to it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, man.
So we should probably wrap up. We've been going for almost 2 hours. So friends, the game is Starflight 3 Universe. It is currently, as we speak, got about 8 or 9 days left in its campaign. You should totally go over to Fig and back it. We will have links. We have links all over the place of this thing. We're gonna have it we have it in the video description. We've got it on the chats everywhere. You have no excuse not to go over there and fig some money. I don't know what the verb would be because they say because on Kickstart they say kick some money, but on Fig, what do you say on Fig? Fig some money to the campaign so we can make this happen, because none of us knew that Starflight 3 was going to be a thing, and now that we know it's going to be a thing, we really want it to be a thing, really badly. So
nicely said.
So please go to fig.com and back Starflight 3. The interesting thing about Fig,
actually, that's,
go ahead. Sorry
to interrupt, but that's actually a fig.co. That's not .com. So it's
I apologize.
Yeah, Fig. No worries. No, it's fine. Everyone does that. It's fig.co/Starflight3, all one word. That's where you want to go.
Yeah, and there'll be links for this in the podcast notes. There'll be links for this in the video notes. It's all over the place. But it's just a couple quick programming notes before we wrap up. This Thursday on our live stream, on our LAN party, we should be playing Overload. I hope we're playing Overload. I think we're playing Overload.
Yeah.
And then next Tuesday, not entirely sure. I've offered it to a guest, and I'm waiting to hear back. But if not, we're probably going to talk about hardware, because new video cards are coming out. I'm building a new computer, so I thought that'd be a fun topic. So next week on the show, not 100% yet. Hopefully we'll be confirming that soon. But Anthony and Greg, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your, I'm sure running a Fig campaign is super busy, and doing the Toe Jam and Earl thing. You guys are about to kick that out the door. So I'm sure you guys are super swamped. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your hectic day to talk to us about Starflights 1, 2, and 3. It's been a real joy. I'm still like super giddy, and I've had a hard time holding it together because I'm just like internally this whole time, like, oh my god. But I really want to
asked some great questions. Yeah, lots of really good questions. Thanks, and lots of fun.
Yeah, thanks for giving us a platform to talk about the game and try and help drum up more awareness. We could really use it, so thank you.
Totally my pleasure, and I'm really hoping that we can have you back once this hits 1.0 in a few years. Because that's probably how long it would take. I'm guessing, right? 2 or 3 years to make the full thing, roughly.
Yeah, the estimated ship date is sometime late 2020. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, you'll probably still beat Star Citizen.
That's true.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I can't not make that joke. I'm sorry.
They are doing one heck of a big undertaking.
Oh, but oh my God,
Undertaker's a word.
Anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Okay. But everyone, thank you so much for listening to the show and everything. We really appreciate it. You all asked some really good questions throughout the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.